I'll keep this short and sweet. A few years back, we were having a brutally cold winter. The snow had frozen into ice and covered everything. It was pitch black in the backyard when I went to let my dog outside one last time before bed that evening. As we exited the house from the sliding door of the walkout basement and onto the lower deck, I felt that something was off. Our house backs up to some woods, so I was accustomed to hearing noises from wildlife in the night. This night was different. Nothing made a sound except the Arctic cold wind, but I had the feeling that I was being watched. The entire time my dog was in the backyard, I looked around nervously, expecting a coyote or other predator to pop out of the tree line. My dog did his business, but afterwards stopped and stared out of the corner of the woods until I got creeped out and called him back inside. I quickly locked the sliding door and shut the curtains, unable to shake the uneasy feeling I had outside. After double and triple checking all the locks in the house, I went to bed. Around 3 in the morning, I heard the muffled sound of my dog barking from the basement 2 floors below. I got up, stumbled down 3 flights of stairs, and found him standing at the basement sliding door. He was peeking his head through the closed curtains, barking his head off with the hair standing up all along his back. I tried calling him away from the door, but he wouldn't let up. I dreaded peeking out of the curtain to see what he was barking at after the uneasy feeling I had earlier in the night. Finally, I held my breath and swiped the curtain aside. I peered into the inky blackness, but saw nothing to cause any alarm. A wave of relief washed over me. I figured it must have been a deer or raccoon in the yard that set him off. He whined at the door for a few minutes until I bribed him upstairs with a dog cookie. I went back to bed and wasn't disturbed again, that is, until the morning when I went to the basement to let out the dog. I opened the sliding door and walked out onto the deck as he bounded into the snow. My blood ran as cold as the sub-zero morning temperatures when I looked down. There, frozen into the ice on the deck, was a set of bare human footprints. They were very clear. I could make out each toe on the person's foot. The prints were large and appeared to be from an adult male. Looking around, I noticed that they started at the base of the deck, went to the sliding door in the window of the basement living room, then seemed to disappear off the side of the deck. I had my snow boots on, so I walked around the yard, but I could find no trace of the footprints in the snow once I left the deck. Keep in mind the daily temperatures that winter barely made it above 0 Fahrenheit, and the wind chill made it feel close to 20 below. Frostbite will set in within a matter of minutes for anyone walking around barefoot, especially in the dead of night. I never experienced anything like that again, but I did adopt a second dog shortly thereafter. I'm a 21-year-old female, and this story took place when I was around 11 years old. I remember this day clearly because it was the first time I was ever allowed to walk to school and back by myself. Up until the age of 14, I lived in what we thought was a safe place in Chautauqua County, New York. Everyone knew everyone. If you thought you would get away with something, then be prepared to have your ear abused by the time you got home. There was this one day though. It was a cold winter day and school unfortunately was still open, so all the neighborhood kids had to walk through knee-high inches of snow just to get to school. It took me longer to leave the house as I was used to walking with my older sister to school since she knew the routes better than me. I always used to make fun of her for being paranoid and taking a different route every day from school, but after that day, I learned that was what saved my life. As I was waiting by the door to leave, my mom came to me and told me that I should ride with her to drop me off because my sister was too sick to go today. Being a brat, I made a big deal about walking by myself because I was almost 12 years old and all my friends' parents let them walk alone. She looked at me for a long while, then told me to make sure I pay attention to cars. I got hit by a car and almost died when I was about 9, so the worry that showed on her face was well warranted. I hurriedly nodded, then headed out of the door to go to school. My sister didn't like to dilly-dally, so she always was in a rush to get to school early, but seeing as it was just me, I thought it would be a good idea to take my time. I would play in the brown slush that was left on the side of the road and even making funny-looking snowballs to see how far I can throw them. Halfway to school, I noticed a white van follow on behind me. Being the playful child that I was, if I had not been bending down to make another snowball, I wouldn't have noticed it slowly creeping up on the street. I told myself I was being stupid, but continued more hurriedly to school. Once I got to school, I took a quick glance over my shoulder and saw the van a few feet behind me. It wasn't until I was on school grounds that it quickly drove by me. I thought that would be the end of it, but throughout the day when I would stare out of the window, the van would be there. I assumed that it never really left, it just parked. Many adults would try to convince me years later that it maybe wasn't the same one, but I knew it was. This van had a bright yellow smile emoji sticker on it. I couldn't see who was in the van, but through the tinted glass I knew they could see me. It was now the end of the day and I wasn't ready to go home. It was too late to call my mom because she was at work and my sister was homesick. I had to suck it up and start walking. I tried to blend in with a group of kids, but most of them were car riders and the others didn't live near me. Remembering what my sister told me, I took another route home. I didn't memorize this route clearly, but I decided anything was better than being spotted by that van. I made it to my main street, but realized my mistake too late. The route I took led back to the main street where I walked to school. Hidden behind a row of cars was the white van with the smiley emoji sticker. I tried to stay calm and walk past it, but once I heard the van door quietly open, I ran. I could hear the rush of 2 pairs of heavy footsteps behind me. They were getting closer, so I did what any normal kid would do, and I cut corners. I cut into someone's backyard until I was directly inside of my house and forced myself into the thick snow to make it to the door. My heart was racing, not because I was running, but because I could still hear them behind me. I made it to the door and banged with all my might until someone came to the door. My sister looked confused, but one look at my face and she pulled me inside and locked the doors. The van was still outside. Truthfully, it stayed out there until my brother got home. Me and my sister don't talk about it, but we both knew how close it was to me going missing. I hadn't thought about this incident in years, but one of my hometown friends showed me an article that came out in 2013. Apparently some man kidnapped and sexually assaulted a girl my age. It wouldn't have scared me if it hadn't mentioned the white van. Whoever you are that attempted to kidnap me and do God knows what else, let's not meet. I'm a tall, yet extremely skinny guy, and I'm 21 years old. I was 20 years old at the time, and it was the week before the presidential election in the United States, and I felt a lot of anxiety about the election. As I live in Manhattan, and there are a lot of crazy people in that city who act as if the entire world is going to end over one simple election. So, feeling exhausted from both that and my university, I decided to visit my friends in Moscow. I'm half Russian and have an apartment in the city center of Moscow. I had never been in Russia while it snowed, and luckily during this time it was snowing, the city looked beautiful, and the vibe I had from the city was perfect. I felt so calm, safe, and the whole world around me just seemed so quiet. Unfortunately, I had severe jet lag and fell asleep around 5 p.m. Moscow time that day. My friend went home to get ready for her classes the next day, and I woke up around 3 a.m. I could not fall back asleep, so I decided to go outside and take a walk around my area while it calmly snowed. I walked around the dead empty city in my district and took in all the beautiful architecture and snow falling down heavily. I don't remember for how long I was walking, but I crossed a bridge and entered deeply into a neighborhood I was not familiar with. I thought it would be okay, as I was in my district and sort of remembered my way back home. I eventually came up to this ginormous entrance of a block unit with a beautiful gate on it. The gate was open, so I decided to step inside, and it looked like a small little compound, or something similar to it. If anyone is from Russia, they probably know what I'm talking about. Everything was dead quiet, and the trees canopied in the square complex. To the right was an extremely tall building with a ginormous door, and I peeked inside and saw a lightly dim lobby with a blinking fluorescent light. I held on the door, and to my surprise it was unlocked. I entered into the massive building and looked around, and I saw many stairs wrapping around in a square leading up a small typical Russian elevator. And to the right of the stairwell stairs that led down, the door at the bottom of the stairs was open. I absolutely do not know what came over me, as I am not one to adventure alone, but as I stated earlier, everything just felt so beautiful. The quiet vibe of snow-covered Russia had me feeling so peaceful, and I decided to just tiptoe on down into the basement to take a closer look. I walked into the room with the open door and threw on my flashlight on my phone. I saw an extremely long tunnel, and I could not see the end of it. I felt threatened by it and got extremely uncomfortable. I decided it was best for me to leave. When I turned around, the only light that was entering the tunnel was from outside of the doorway. I saw standing in the door a black silhouette. I quickly understood it was the outline of a person who was at least 5 inches taller than me, so I would say he was about 6'5". He was massive and my stomach dropped so hard my heart began to beat super quickly. He started to speak to me in Russian, but as my Russian isn't fluent, I did not understand everything he said. "I'm sorry, I don't speak Russian," and I said to him in Russian. "You speak English," he said in English to me. I told him I did, and he asked if I knew where I was. No, I told him, as my mind started to fill up with a lot of different scenarios, one of which with me having to run down this tunnel and getting lost to avoid him if he chased me. These tunnels used to be used for Red Army soldiers to move from one place to another during the war, he explained to me. This whole building used to be a bunker for Red Army soldiers. I said, to show some interest, and began to move towards the left while facing him, in attempts to get him to move out of the doorway. This whole place is now apartments. I have one on the top floor. You should come see it," he said to me. "It's quite late, and I think I should be going," I said. However, he grabbed my small wrist with a lot of strength and led me towards the stairs to go to the main floor of the lobby. He called the small elevator, and if any of you have ever been to Russia, you know exactly what type of elevator it is. The type that can barely fit 2 people. He began telling me about how he just got back from Chicago, and that his husband loves Chicago as well. This started to have me panicking, as I thought to myself that there would be another man up there to where he was bringing me, and I would have 2 men overpower me. Once we go to his room, I looked at this massive studio apartment he had. He had only candles to light the room, with a lot of tapestries dividing it up, with both the candle and moonlight shining through it to create a super eerie vibe. I looked out his window as he instructed me, and I have to admit, the view was amazing. I got a panoramic view of Tugunskaya and of the Katonicheskaya embankment building. I then started scoping around, looking for an opportunity to get out of there. "Where's your husband?" I asked. He looked at me and laughed. "Oh, he's dead." He then picked me up and I asked him what he was doing. He brought me into another room and began to touch me inappropriately. He ran his hand down my back and took my phone from my back pocket. I did not realize he did this, as I was just in horror as this man licked me and said explicit things to me in Russian. I tried to pull away, but it made him squeeze and corner me even harder. After about 10 minutes of this, he told me to wait a moment. He went into his bathroom, and in this moment, I immediately sprinted over to the door. There were no lights, so I went to pull out my phone for the flashlight, only to my horror the phone was missing from my back pocket. I almost nearly had a heart attack as I realized I would have to go back into that bedroom to get my phone. I darted back into the room and saw my phone lying on a couch he had next to his bed. I grabbed it and ran for the door. I unlocked 2 locks on one door, and when I opened that one, there was an outer door. I managed to get it open. As I ran out, the adrenaline was so high in me, I ignored the elevator and went straight to the stairs. I ran around in circles down it for what seemed like forever until I finally reached the bottom. I practically leaped down a few steps to go out of the lobby and down to the main floor I had entered from. It wouldn't open as I pushed as hard as I could on it. I then began to start sobbing to myself and cursing. The thought of me having to go back into that tunnel to hide again from him came over me, and I almost began to accept that as a reality at this point. I quickly tried to pull myself together and noticed the typical button you should press to disable the magnet that holds the door locked. I pressed it, heard the monotone beep that follows, and fell out of the door and into the snow. I never understood why characters could not pull themselves together when running in horror movies, always falling on themselves. But in that moment I did the same, and I sort of understand it now. I treaded through the thigh-high snow onto the main road by exiting the complex. I sprinted, ignoring my lungs screaming for air down the main road, only slowing down once I reached a bridge that led me to my street. Once I got inside, I sat in my bed for 2 hours, nearly shaking before I told anyone about it.